How's it going, you guys? So, I'm having my morning coffee right now, getting ready for a max effort deadlift and barbell row session, followed by 2 hours of jujitsu practice, and then I'm going to try to get a heavy bag conditioning session in for Muay Thai. And I want to talk a little bit about individuality in natural medicine and herbalism. Okay, so this principle goes for pretty much everything to a certain extent. Once you got the basic principles of of whatever field it is, whatever subject we're talking about, whether it's nutrition or herbalism, once you have the foundational understanding, then you can move on to specialization. A lot of people, they want to just say, "Oh, I'll do whatever works for me," when in reality they don't have the foundations of the subject down yet, and so they don't know what it means to for something to work. Like you see raw vegans who like get sarcopenia and then become schizophrenic, and the whole time they're telling everyone, "I'm just doing what works for me. It works for me. I lost a bunch of weight," and meanwhile they lost all their bone mass at the same time. That's raw veganism. Anyway, so individualism in medicine can be a scapegoat for disordered approaches to it. It can cause people a lot of problems if they don't have a foundational understanding down yet, okay? And I can't stress that enough when we're talking about individualism, because a lot of people, they're like, "Oh, well, you know, I do best with a high carb diet or a low carb diet, or I do best with, um, you know, with this herb or that herb." But if you don't have a foundational understanding of what it is you're talking about, then you don't actually know if it's working for you or if maybe there's a better solution. And that's key. Is if you've never actually fully tried a certain herb or a certain nutrition or what have you, and you haven't tried it in the proper way, then you'll never know. You'll never know if what you're doing is working for you or not, because there might be something out there that works 20 times better, but you haven't tried it yet. And so you don't actually know what it feels like for something to work, okay? And that comes from researching the mechanisms, researching other people's experiences, and researching the proper ways of doing something. Okay, that's very important. So anyway, recently I took rhodiola for about almost 3 weeks, and I found that it gives me exactly the opposite effects of everybody else. Everybody else, well, a lot of people have the same effects as me, but most people when they take rhodiola, they feel energized, they feel on top of the world and motivated. Well, I felt tired, I would say unmotivated, unenergized to do anything other than study. I just want to lay in my bed and study science and read books all day. So, with that being said, it would be a great focus agent for me, if I really wanted to get some studying done. But if I need to do 3 hours of jujitsu practice, it's not going to work very well for me because I didn't even want to get to jujitsu. And then when I was in jujitsu, I was thinking about nutrition and all this stuff. I was getting choked out thinking about the cause of heart disease. Can you believe that? But for most people, rhodiola actually energizes them. It helps them actually get out to the gym. It gives them the energy and stamina to be in the gym and these types of things. Now, obviously, I've taken rhodiola many times over the years, and I've studied the science behind it on numerous occasions, and there's always new studies coming out, especially mechanistic studies detailing the mechanisms of action of rhodiola and all of these herbs. There's always new science coming out. And so every time I try a new herb, I always have to dig back into the science, right? Because it's been since the last time I tried rhodiola was in 2016. Anyway, I'm used to this because I've tried so many different herbs. I mean, if you look at my medicine cabinet, and these are just some of the main ones. I have other cabinets full. In fact, we threw away so many of my herbs from when I moved out of my last condo, as you can see, those are the things I generally take on a regular basis. Not exactly, but I had a whole pantry full of herbs and supplements, and we had to throw it away because well, actually, I think there's boxes full in my mom's garage. Anyway, I tried lots and lots of herbs, and so I'm used to having varying effects of different kinds, right? So, there's a couple things you got to consider when it comes to variations in individuals with herbs, right? Because I have been doing this a long time. The first thing is the dosage, right? So, for example, with rhodiola, and this applies to every herb, with rhodiola, smaller doses are supposed to be more stimulatory. Higher doses are supposed to be calming. They're supposed to put you to sleep. I remember taking 4 rhodiolas at one point, and it put me to sleep for 4 hours, and I had the most amazing sleep of my life. Some people, though, no matter how much rhodiola they take, it's still stimulatory. So there's individual polymorphisms in people's genes that can be at play here, making them have different effects. There are also people just having a different composition of receptor sensitivity to different neurotransmitters. People having a different composition of neurotransmitters, of neurotransmitter activity in their periphery. For example, some people might have just so much adrenaline and cortisol and so much catecholamine activity, so much dopamine, noradrenaline, adrenaline, the whole catecholamine cascade that pumps people up, okay, that fuels glutamate and addictions and stimulates neurons to the point of almost dying. The whole catecholamine cascade is really pumped up, and if you have a lot of that, you might be able to take something like rhodiola and it'll balance you out. Whereas some people, they might have they might not have enough catecholamines and they might benefit more from drinking coffee or, taking a low dose of yohimbe or, and then those types of people, they might have too much of the neurotransmitters that rhodiola boosts, too much serotonin, right? And when they take rhodiola, it actually imbalances them to the point of depression, which is something that, rhodiola is supposed to help people with depression. And of course, if you look at our Western or modern society, most people are overwhelmed with catecholamines. For me, I took 400 milligrams of supplemental caffeine, and I still could not feel pumped up on rhodiola. I wasn't even taking a high dose. Anyway, so different people can have different compositions of neurotransmitters, which is going to change the effects of the herb. The other thing is obviously the extract. So, especially with something like rhodiola, but this applies to everything. So, typically, when you're taking any kind of medicinal herb these days, or any kind of herb in general, you're taking it in a capsule form or powdered form, or a tincture form. Typically, they're going to have obviously different extracts, standardized extracts and generally it's going to contain different amounts of certain active ingredients. And so you have to study the different active constituents of an herb so that you understand like what is it you're looking for. So for example, with rhodiola, there's generally two different active constituents. And the one I took isn't actually a standardized extract, but one of them increases serotonin, the other one increases dopamine, or so they say. And so if you get the one that increases serotonin more, right, it's standardized to have the active ingredient that increases serotonin more, then you're going to have more of a serotonin effect. Whereas if you take a different brand of the herb, and it's standardized for the active ingredient that increases dopamine, well, now you're going to have a completely different effect. So it depends on the type of extract you get, it's going to affect you differently. And so again, that's where studying the mechanism and understanding the foundations of what it is you're studying plays a vital role. If you don't understand the different ingredients, the different, isolated, the different standardized chemicals, the different types of extracts, and how that affects the effects of the herb, if you don't understand that, then it's going to be very easy for somebody to just take rhodiola, for example, and just say, oh, it didn't work for me. It made me feel like shit. It's like, okay, well, what type were you taking? Oh, I don't know, just like, this extract. Okay, but, what type of standardized extract were you taking? If you understand the type of extract you're taking, the active chemicals, well, then you understand and you search up the active ingredients that it's standardized for, then you'll be able to understand the effects with a more holistic understanding. You'll know why you got that effect, right? And so that's vitally important because if you just write it off as, oh, it just didn't work for me, you know, it could have worked for you maybe if you would have gotten a certain extract that actually has the active ingredients that you need. Maybe you needed a 5-to-1 extract that was standardized for rosavins rather than, saponins or what have you. Maybe you needed more saponins and less of a different compound. But you'll never know unless you actually research it. So, different people are going to need different doses of certain herbs. Different people are going to need different types of extracts, right? Also, different constituents in an herb are absorbed in different forms more effectively. For example, taking a tincture and might actually increase the absorption of a certain constituent because of the alcohol, like an alcoholic tincture. Okay. Whereas if you take a glycerin tincture, it might certain constituents might not have any effects at all. I can't begin to explain how many times I've actually, had a client or a subscriber take an herb that I've recommended and they take the alcohol-free tincture and wonder why it's not working. But then I pull up a study and show them, hey, um, all of the clinical effects in clinical trials of this herb showed effectiveness in alcoholic tinctures because the alcohol actually works with the active ingredients to make it more absorbable. And so if you really want the effects of this herb, you're going to have to take the alcoholic tincture. That's why it didn't work for you. And so, there's some herbs where if you take the alcoholic tincture versus a non-alcoholic tincture, it has completely different effects. Uh, and so that plays a role. And sometimes the dried extract either doesn't work at all or works better than an alcoholic tincture. Sometimes, and honestly, is generally why I like to take the whole herb in a tea or in the format that's traditionally used in, because that's how you're going to get the best effect usually, not always. Sometimes standardized extracts work better. But it's because, there are specific ways that these herbs and their active constituents are absorbed. Another good example would be, like turmeric and golden milk, right? Some of the active constituents in turmeric, for example, are more effectively absorbed in fat, okay? And I can't think of one off the top of my head, which I should be able to. Probably could if I put more effort into it. But there's quite a lot of herbs that are best taken with a high fat meal or with fat, or have traditionally been taken with milk or butter or ghee. Turmeric is one of them. And there's reasons for that. Okay, so if you take an herb and you don't take it with fat, right? Take an herb that needs to be taken with fat. You don't take it with fat, and it doesn't work for you. And you're posting on Reddit, oh, this herb didn't work for me. Well, no wonder you didn't take it with fat. So, anyway, so there is a lot of individualized effectiveness in herbalism and vitamin and mineral supplements as well. and nutrition. But if you don't understand the foundations of how something is supposed to work, or you just don't understand the basic principles and variants and what controls the effectiveness of things, like how things are absorbed, you know, what chemical constituents give you are supposed to give you effects and these types of things. If you don't have the basic principles and the basic understanding down, then nothing's really going to work as effectively as it could because you don't know what to look for. You don't know how to use these things. But it is true that different people are going to need different herbs depending on, you know, where they are in their life and the constitution of their body. But I think individualism is given too much credit, and I think not enough credit is given to actually understanding what these things are supposed to do. Okay? Because I've had many herbs where I take one type of extract and it gives me like a sleepy effect or whatever. I take another one and it gives me a like energy boosting effect. Some people are like, whoa, what the hell? Like, is this spiked with crack or something? It's like, no, you're just taking a different extract. And it can act almost like a completely different herb. And I'll tell you, like taking teas versus taking standardized extracts is one of the biggest ways of seeing completely different effects because they are different herbs almost, not really. Anyway, I need to get to the fucking gym. I'm hyped up already. I'm shaking, probably because it's cold as hell and I don't use air conditioning, so I could spike a hormetic effect. Post your comments down below. Talk to y'all next time.